Hey dudes, and welcome back to the Bants. As always, I am your host, the Bants, and as you can see, or rather in this case here, the audio is finally not fucked up for once. So of course that means that yes, we can now finally continue on with our list week videos. And yes, if you couldn't already guess from the title of the video, in this video today we will be going over my top 5 techwear brands from 2018. Now, this might come as a surprise to some of you, but out of all the list week videos I've done or am still doing, honestly, this was probably the hardest to make. Not because the choices themselves were really that hard to make, more so just because there wasn't that many choices to go around. Sure, I could have just been like any other techwear reviewer out there. I'm sure there's 2 or 3 that exist somewhere in the depths of YouTube, and just gone, okay, let's think of 5 popular techwear brands. We have Acronym, Stone Island Shadow Project, Guerrilla Group, and 11 by BBS. Boom, top 5 list, done. Easy. But of course, I didn't want to do that because that's not what these videos are about. These videos are about exploring and learning about these smaller and lesser known designers and brands out there. And even beside that, going back to those top 5 popular brands I talked about, in all honesty, especially if you know the scene, you'd know that most of them have been slacking recently. I mean, you're seriously gonna make me pay 2 to 3K for an overly technical jacket and then tell me that if it gets any holes, or if any of the seams rip, or if any of the threads come loose, that's just part of the vibe because that's how these pieces age? Come on, Errolson, this is fucking techwear, not Benham, for Christ's sake. However, in choosing to go with only smaller labels, it didn't really leave me with a lot of options, unfortunately. Well, that's not entirely true, but let me explain why. There actually are a decent amount of companies out there doing very great techwear and doing some very interesting pieces. However, and this is a big however, because techwear is such a niche market, many of these companies are extremely tiny, or just starting up, or just a flash in the pan. They're here one day and gone tomorrow. And don't even get me started on the amount of brands that started in a completely different genre of fashion and have slowly either started to hybrid tech into their designs or have just decided to go full-blown techwear in a matter of seasons, only to go back to their normal styles when they get bored of it. But whatever the case may be, due to the fact that so many of these brands are just so hard to find or see in person without buying them, I can't really attest to their quality because honestly, I haven't seen many, if not most of these brands in person, which is really a bit rough seeing as how I'm trying to highlight and showcase these brands to you, knowing full well that I can't attest to their quality. So before we get into the main list, and actually even before we get into the honorable mentions, I did want to showcase a couple of these upcoming brands that if you're heavily invested in techwear, you might be interested in checking out if you haven't heard of them before. But once again, let me reiterate, as far as the quality of these pieces, I have absolutely no idea, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, and if you do want to just learn more about them yourselves, I highly recommend you do. Now, first up, we have the brand First Pattern. That's 1STPAT-RN. Now, First Pattern is first and foremost a contemporary brand with just some slight hints of techwear here and there. However, their designs, be it contemporary or techwear, are much more on the interesting side than what you'd expect from a normal contemporary wear brand. And when you mix the two ideas together, those ideas of course being contemporary and techwear, you make for some really interesting fits that I don't think I've ever seen anybody do quite like them. So if you are a fan of that much more hybrid style we've been seeing more and more of nowadays, I would definitely recommend checking them out. Then up next we have Kith Wan Studios, and the reason I'm highlighting them is because these are probably some of the most interesting tech pieces I've seen probably in a long time. Now, I wouldn't necessarily consider these pieces lunar core, but you definitely cannot dismiss how sci-fi influenced every single one of these pieces is. But even for as interesting and cool as these pieces may be, or even how well they might fit in with some techwear you already have, this brand is insanely small. I mean, this is the only season they've done, and I think even then it's only been 6 pieces, and that was a couple months ago, and even as of now, we haven't really seen any word of a second season yet. But even if that's the case, if you are a fan of much more abstract techwear and very heavily sci-fi influenced techwear, then these are a definitely must look. Then up next we have the brand Sever by Gosha's original muse, if you will. Now, if you've been following this brand, some of you might be surprised to see it on this list, because up until this very last season, pretty much everything they did was solely streetwear. Checking out their most previous season, you'll probably be insanely surprised to see that pretty much all of those streetwear elements are gone, and in their place is this insanely heavy tech ninja style that we've been seeing for pretty much the last decade. And even though, yes, this style is a little bit played out as of now, if you are a fan of that style still, I highly recommend checking out some of these pieces, because even though, yes, I still cannot attest to their quality, at the very least they look absolutely fantastic. And finally, the last brand I wanted to highlight as far as up-and-comers is one that I actually just talked about very recently, and that is the brand Hamcus. Another brand that started out with mainly streetwear roots. What we've seen from their most recent collection is some inspirations from flight suits to undercover to Rick Owens, all done in their own style with a little bit of added technical flair and materials in pretty much all of their pieces. Also, what we're seeing here is the largest collection of pieces out of all of the brands I've mentioned so far. So if you're a fan of any of those brands I just mentioned, once again being kind of Army Surplus, which I know isn't a brand, but also Undercover and Rick Owens, but I've been looking for a more, I guess, technical vibe along with it, then I would definitely check out this brand as well. Alright, and now let's move quickly on into our honorable mentions, of which I have 2 which I really want to cover. The first of which will probably come as a shock to many of you, and that is the brand that we all know as Kith. Yes, I'm talking about Kith. But I guess more specifically, I'm talking solely about their Utah collection. Really, this collection has pretty much everything you want from a techwear collection. We're seeing a ton of good quality pieces mixed with some very good materials, which of course by this point you know Kith has become known for, blended with some very interesting designs and details and aesthetics, such as some of the pocket placements on some of these pieces, which in my opinion is really well done and very cool. Plus, we're seeing some of the most interesting color schemes I've ever seen out of a techwear brand all the way up till now, done in multiple different varieties in this collection, all of which come together into some very nice fits. However, the reason that it remains an honorable mention is because, once again, it is only one collection, and this is not what Kith does as a whole. So if you are a fan of techwear and have always been looking just for some more colorful pieces to add into your collection, then definitely look no further than this, because there is plenty of the color you're looking for here. Then, in my second and final honorable mention, I have Kazuki Kuraishi, or more specifically, the collab between Kazuki Kuraishi and the North Face. Now, even though it is only one collection, I still have to say this is probably one of my favorite techwear collections of the year, ranging everywhere from fairly simple to fairly complex. What we're seeing here is a wide variety of different details and designs that we haven't seen done exactly like this in techwear before, which is always super refreshing, seeing as how kind of monotonous Techwear has gotten. And of course, all of this is done with just a nice attention to detail and quality that I really wouldn't expect anything less from when we're dealing, of course, with Kazuki Kuraishi. However, even for as good as I think it is and deserving to be on the main list as I think it should be, the fact of the matter is that it's still only one collection, one collab, and that does not make a brand, so here we are. Okay, so now we've gone through our upcoming designers and labels, as well as our honorable mentions, so now it is finally time to move on to the top 5. And coming in at number 5 is the duo known as Abasi Rosborough. Now, the only reason why Abasi Rosborough is so high on this list is because they are mainly a contemporary brand and much more set on being a contemporary brand, which really isn't a problem, but once again, this is a Techwear list. However, that doesn't change the fact that this duo has absolutely blown me away with their hybrid contemporary designs. From their interesting design patterns and use of color and materials, we're really seeing from them some of the most unique Techwear out there to date. But even more incredible than their designs and apparel is their commitment to making ethical Techwear. By using almost solely recycled and organic materials, we've really seen the duo become one of the front runners of this movement. A movement that up until recently felt very much like an oxymoron, because how often does organic Techwear really come to mind? So if you are a fan of Techwear, but definitely much more on the toned down side and mixed with that contemporary style, highly recommend giving these guys a look. Then coming in at number 4, we have the Ukrainian-based Riot Division, because why wouldn't they deserve to be on this list? What we have here is just a really solid Techwear brand, and probably what many people would consider the most traditional Techwear brand you'll probably see on this list, with an absolutely huge selection of goods and some very utilitarian designs, and probably the most interesting bags and accessories out of any brand mentioned on any of these lists, as well as some very interesting pants too, which is something that is hugely overlooked by most Techwear brands. Throw in the fact that all of these pieces just look so incredibly good when layered all over each other, and you have the makings of a brand that really definitely deserves to be here. Now, before we move on, I would like to just briefly apologize because there is currently a baby screaming right outside my window, so if the mic picks it up for whatever reason, I'm very sorry. But now moving on into number 3, we have a tie between literally screaming. But now moving on into number 3, we have a tie between 2 of my favorite brands out of last year, and those are Iise and Tobias, Birk, Nielsen. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering why these brands are so low on this list after what I said about Abasi Rosborough. Well, the difference between Abasi Rosborough and these 2 brands is just solely the implementation of their Techwear in their seasons. The Techwear from these 2 brands just stands out more, it's more technical, and unfortunately, it's just more interesting overall. And don't get me wrong, that's nothing against Abasi Rosborough. As I said before, they're just more contemporary based, and once again, this is a Techwear list. But now moving back to the 2 brands at hand, once again Iise and Tobias, Birk, Nielsen. They both have just such an interesting take on the hybrid of contemporary and Techwear. They're able to flow their more interesting utilitarian pieces with their otherwise more classical menswear cuts, and are able to do so without losing the integrity of either style in the process. And even though I do think that both of these brands are fantastic, I do want to give a special shout out to Tobias, Birk, Nielsen for also making the overall feel and tone of his pieces sync together so nicely too, through the use of these very minimal colors and blotted materials and overall dystopian vibes. So if you're a fan of that hybrid style but done in a much more clear-cut way, for the lack of a better term, I highly recommend checking out both these brands. Iise if you're more a fan of colors and patterns, and Tobias Birk Nielsen if you're more into the dystopian feel of Techwear. Alright, and coming in at number 2, we have a brand that kind of came out of nowhere, but still made a big enough splash that they deserve to be this far down on the list, and that is the brand known as Blackmerle. Now yes, this brand definitely could have just as easily made its way onto the up and coming list, mainly because it's only really been around for 2 years now. But even if that's the case, it most definitely deserves to be on this list just for how exciting it is. Even for as popular as Techwear has been for the last decade or so, it isn't really until just recently that brands have really started to toy with the idea of modular clothing. And boy, does Blackmerle just ramp up that idea to 11 here. Just take a look at some of the images here. I mean, no one, and I mean no one out there right now is doing anything remotely close to this. The majority of tech brands out there don't even touch modular at all, and for the few that do, it's scattered across just a handful of pieces, and you're only really able to place them in just very specific locations. But Blackmerle throws that concept out of the window and seems to give you an almost endless amount of variety in comparison. So if you've been looking for something fresh and exciting, or even just completely different than what you've experienced up in Techwear to this point in time, really, definitely, I can't recommend checking out this brand enough. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, my number 1 brand of 2018. And if there's been a brand you haven't seen on this list up till now that you've been expecting, it's probably this one, and that is, of course, C2H4. I mean, let's be real. Was there anyone that wasn't expecting this? Even though Lunar Core's interest is now somewhat waning as opposed to how it's been the last year or two, and even though personally I don't think I'd ever find myself wearing Lunar Core, though I can definitely admire it from afar, nobody else has had such a large and interesting and cohesive clothing line this year in Techwear, aside from C2H4, combining interesting materials with unique details and design choices, while adding colors and graphics that help unite this collection into something that feels like it was just ripped out of almost any sci-fi classic, plus the addition of some very nice shoe collaborations, something that many other Techwear brands aren't doing out there, that go along with their style so easily and flawlessly as well, which can't always be said about some of the other Techwear brands out there doing shoes. All of this really just makes for such a fantastic look and well executed vision from the brand. A unique look that doesn't immediately devolve into tech ninja or acronym jutsu that you just don't seem to see that often in Techwear anymore. So once again, my kudos and congratulations to C2H4. You are by far and above my favorite Techwear brand of 2018. So all in all, what do you guys think of my list? Are there some brands on here you've never heard from before that you're interested in finding out about? Is there some brands that you think I missed? Or do you think I should have added some of the popular brands and that they do in fact deserve to be on this list? Whatever you guys are thinking, feel free to hit me up in the comments down below. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say. And thank you guys all once again for watching my videos and supporting my content. I hope you all have a great weekend ahead of you, and as always, until next time.